All right, we are back talking about Survivor 41, and we just had episode 8, and what an episode. Did not exceed that vote out happening. I feel like it really changes up how I view the edit of the season, and I think it really changes how I view a lot of the players still left in the game. So, as usual, we'll be ranking each player left in the game based on how likely I think it is that they will win Survivor 41. And let's just jump right in. I mean, we have a lot to talk about today. So, starting off the list at number 11, as usual, we have the boot of the episode. We have Tiffany. Now, again, throughout the season, I know I've had Tiffany in the top half, really a top contender in my eyes based on her edit. In the last couple episodes, I even had her number one. So to see her go out here in at the final 11 is a major shock for me. Now, early on in the episode, we see her throw Evie under the bus and get a confessional talking about how she'll do anything to get further in the game. Now, it's possible that the Yase's could have just been splitting up to lower their threat level, although we see people like Deshawn reject their proposals. But after Evie, the majority's target, wins immunity, Tiffany becomes the backup target, and the majority agrees to split the vote between her and Xander. Now, the rest of the episode did try to set up other potential boots like Heather, which I didn't buy for a second, and Nasir with him talking about his idol, making me think a blindside could have happened. But despite all this, the majority agrees to the plan, split the vote, and Tiffany goes home. Overall, Tiffany didn't play the best game in the world, but was shown to be quite perceptive in confessionals. Early on, she's viewed as a liability for a challenge weakness. While she isn't in much danger due to her alliance with the women, she's still the minority's target at both tribal councils she attends pre merge. During the second tribal, she's the main reason her alliance targets David instead of Xander. Now, the show did portray this as uh, Tiffany not really understanding the rules of Xander's idol. However, she said since then that she saw David as the bigger target moving forward and recognized that Xander's lack of a vote made him more expendable and therefore could be pushed down the line a bit. So, there's that at least. Now, that from that point forward, she remained in the majority alliance with Xander as the next boot, should Yase return the tribal. Even so, I have a sense that Evie was the main leader of that alliance, as they're the one making Xander feel comfortable. Coming to the merge, she sticks with her Yase group. However, upon losing Liana, they fall into the minority, which isn't great. At that first tribal, they're able to counter Liana's knowledge is power twist, but while Sydney is voted out in that spot, that didn't have much to do with Tiffany or Yase, as they were trying to take out Deshawn. Now, to her and Yase's credit, targeting Deshawn was the optimal move there, as Deshawn appeared to be an integral figure in that majority group. However, they just couldn't get the numbers there. And then after that, Tiffany is voted out after failing to break up the majority, despite there being a number of cracks there. Now, I think as a player, she was someone willing to play an aggressive, strategically active game, although I think for one, I feel like based on the relationship she spilled out there, she was kind of loyal to Yase for a lot of the game. Like she talks about being loyal to Evie and how she wanted to stick with the Yases, but got upset when she sensed that Xander and Liana were flipping. And we also see that she has some less than perfect reads. I mentioned the pre-merge how, she says that, like Xander was someone to keep around at that second tribal, but I think some of it was just her not understanding how the idol worked as well. Like, there's that. Again, I pegged Tiffany as a top contender throughout the season, largely due to her edit. And I'll admit that it was a strange edit, like, especially early on. Like, there was some very mixed content in episode two that was a mostly negative episode for her. She got some mixed content here or there that made me question things a bit. But I feel like compared to the rest of the cast, she had a less flawed edit than a lot of the other players, which made me peg her as a top contender. And especially as other people like Chantelle started to emerge as a decoy winner, and as people like Liana like sort of faltered out, I started to think that Tiffany would be the clear front runner to win based on the edit. But in the end, they decided to blindside us and really take out Tiffany much earlier than I thought that you would. So I'm very surprised, and I feel like now knowing that Tiffany isn't the winner, it makes me recontextualize how I view the season. So again, I feel like Tiffany was a fun character, but again, she was voted out, so she's here at number 11. Now we're moving on to number 10, and if you've seen some of these past power ranking entries, then you'll probably know who the bottom two are. But at number 10, I have Heather. Now, obviously, this was a bit more prominent of an episode for Heather. I mean, it's not really enough to make me consider her a top contender at all, really. In fact, seeing her like really get more visibility after not getting much content at all, like plus like what she actually did in the episode wasn't particularly great. Now, we did see her early on, like with that group of Deshawn and Erica. Like Deshawn was sharing his feelings about working with Yase early on. I found that interesting that we saw him saying this in front of both Heather and Erica. And then later on the episode, she emerges like she's one of the people that competes in the immunity challenge, is in the final two of that challenge with Evie, and obviously she ends up losing. Later on during the scramble, we hear her name getting thrown out as a potential target. Now, I mentioned this during Tiffany's entry that I didn't buy this. Like, I don't think it's necessarily Heather's time to go. I think she's someone that will make it towards the end, like probably final seven, final six, and then get taken out in that spot. So I didn't exactly think it was her time to go yet, so I didn't exactly believe this. And then at Tribal Council, we see that she's the one to make it go live. And it's interesting seeing her like try to scramble the vote at the last second. They tried to set this up as a potential let's throw the vote onto Heather sort of situation. Again, try to set up that potential boot. Obviously, that wasn't meant to be. But it was interesting seeing her like try to instill some chaos. But really, I mean, I don't think it was that good of a move for her because one, I mean, there was a chance that she could have been voted out there, and also she tried to get rid of Nasir, which I don't think is a good move for her at all. I feel like Nasir is one of the people that she should be keeping around a bit more. I mean, I feel like Nasir is someone that she could potentially work with should Danny and Deshawn get taken out. So I don't think that was necessarily the correct move there. And then she votes in the majority to take out Tiffany there. So none of that is particularly great for her. Again, there was a bit more content there for Heather. Like it was interesting to see, but I don't think any of it was beneficial for her game whatsoever. So I have her here at number 10. Now we're moving on to number 9, and again, we have the same person in the bottom two, but I feel like they have slightly more going for them, and that is Erica. Now, again, admittedly, Erica didn't get that much content in this episode. I feel like she was less involved in what happened in the episode than Heather was, but again, I feel like there is more going for her than Heather. I feel like she's more likely to become a big player. I guess her main involvement in the episode is during the reward challenge where she once again draws a great rock. Sort of funny how that situation played out, only for Xander to jump in and declare that he wants to sit out of the challenge as well, probably thinking that there would be an advantage there. So obviously that ended up happening. And there was a scene I mentioned earlier where she was seen talking to Deshawn and Heather, making me think that Erica has kind of gotten closer to Deshawn to a degree. I mean, I don't particularly buy it. Like, I don't like how there hasn't been an explanation for why she's sticking with the Luvus when she was clearly at the bottom of the Luvu alliance. I mean, again, it could possibly be because Sarah Sydney was eliminated, which in turn better her position within that group. But again, like the fact that she isn't getting much content, her only confessional in the episode was after she won the reward challenge. She got to talk about the reward, which is usually a filler confessional. Doesn't really bode well if you're the one that has to deliver that. So again, I have her again here at number 9. Now we're moving on to number 8. And the person we'll be talking about here isn't low because of the edit they got in this episode. I mean, this person definitely got more than someone we'll be talking about a little later. But the reason I have them this low is because I feel like there is a high likelihood that this person is the next boot. So at number 8, we have Ricard. Now, again, I feel like there is a possibility Ricard is the next boot. I actually thought there was a chance Ricard could have been the boot in this episode if Evie had won immunity, which obviously wasn't the case. But I feel like this episode is setting up a downfall of Ricard in the next couple episodes. I mean, the main content that he gets in this episode comes during after the reward challenge, where obviously his team wins the reward. They go off and eat grilled cheese sandwiches, and then they come back, and like we see him trying to eat the papaya, which gets him some pretty negative content there. And I feel like again, that was a pretty negative moment for him where he tries to eat the papaya, like got a lot of negativity there. And coupled with the edit he's been getting, like that, and also the conflict he's been getting with Chantelle, like over the last couple episodes, I sense that a flip is coming relatively soon. And when that flip comes, there is a likelihood that Ricard could be the first victim of that. I could see the conflict between Chantelle and Ricard coming to a head, and I feel like if that were to happen, that Chantelle will probably win that, especially at this stage in the game where it seems like a lot of the people in that majority are closer to Chantelle than they are to Ricard, although we'll talk about Chantelle a little bit later. So, but yeah, I mean, I think Ricard is being set up for downfall. I feel like that papaya situation is being set up to show him being a bit more villainous, being someone that could be taken out in the next couple of rounds, probably an opportunity for the minority to get back into the majority. And again, I feel like Ricard is someone that could be taken out. So that's the main reason I have him here at number 8. Now we're moving on to number 7. We have someone who is in a similar boat as Ricard. I feel like this person could be taken out in the next couple of rounds. And while I didn't see how it would function gameplay wise, I actually thought there was a chance he could have been taken out this episode. So at number 7, we have Nasir. Now, again, I actually thought there was a chance Nasir could be blindsided in this episode. Mainly because like we had a confessional from him after the reward challenge where he talks about collecting papayas, and then after the immunity challenge, and this one was more telling, we get a confessional of him mentioning his idol. Now, again, his idol hadn't been mentioned or hadn't been highlighted in the last couple episodes. Now, some of that is because of the knowledge is power advantage and the majority focusing in on Xander and the Yases. I get that getting more focus, but I found that interesting how Nasir got a confessional talking about how he'll come out tonight with his idol still in his pocket. And that made me think that there was a chance that Nasir could have been blindsided with an idol in his pocket. Now, could that still happen? Probably. I mean, and I actually think that from a gameplay perspective, there was some incentive from the Yases to try to blindside Nasir with his idol in his pocket. But obviously, it didn't come to pass in this episode. However, I still think it's a possibility that could happen in the future. I mean, I feel like Nasir is someone that, again, could be set up to be one of these first victims when a flip inevitably happens. And I feel like it'll be interesting to see, especially with his relationship with Xander. I did find it interesting how, like, in the merge episode, Xander and Nasir were talking and it made it seem like they were going to work together. But then in this episode, they literally vote for each other. So that was a bit interesting to see. Both of them have idols, of course. And I feel like based on the edit, like, if that's setting up a conflict between those two, that Xander will win that battle and he'll be able to take out Nasir possibly with his idol in his pocket. But again, like the fact that he had that confessional in this episode made me think that Nasir could have been the target in this episode. And it was a bit surprising to see that not come to pass. However, I still don't think he's going to win the game. I still think that he's going to be targeted due to his likability, possibly due to his challenge performance. I mean, he hasn't won any individual immunities yet. However, we've seen in the past, like content wise, how he does care about challenges and wanting to do well in challenges. So again, I don't think he's winning the game, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was voted out in the next couple episodes. So I have Nasir at number 7. Now we're moving on to number 6, and we have someone who, again, I don't feel that great about in the grand scheme of things, and he had a very invisible episode for the most part. But at number 6, we have Danny. Now, again, I feel like Danny was largely absent from this episode. I feel like the main content we got from him, aside from the reward, was after the immunity challenge, where he presented the idea of blindsiding Nasir with his idol in his pocket, which again, I thought might have actually led to something, but obviously from that we lead into a confrontation between Deshawn and Chantelle, where they disagree over whether to actually target Xander or Nasir in this instance. So again, not too much content from Danny. I mean, he is technically the one to introduce the idea of blindsiding Nasir and seems to be on board with it. However, again, most of that just leads into content of Chantelle and Deshawn arguing, you know, like and leading to Chantelle like, you know, like starting to like have issues with her own alliance. And in the end, he ends up voting for Xander, sort of following Chantel's wishes. But again, I feel like this was a largely absent episode for Danny, and considering how inconsistent his edit has been, I feel like he is not going to win. Even so, I feel like he's not in the worst position in the world. I feel like he can definitely get a bit further. I still worry about him being targeted later on, especially if a flip does end up happening. But I am surprised to say that he hasn't been targeted yet, and he doesn't seem to be talked about as much of a challenge threat so far. But again, I don't think he's going to win, so I have him here at number six. Now we're moving on to number five, and we have someone who, again, I think is still going to make it decently far, but I talked about her last week and how I felt like she had no chance of winning from this point on. But at number five, we have Liana. Now, this was a bit of an interesting episode for Liana. I mean, and not exactly in a good way. So I guess her main content in this episode comes from her observing how the other Yases are trying to scramble, trying to turn on each other, and how she seems to be enjoying that, especially as she is now in the majority. Later on, after the reward challenge, we see Xander trying to build inroads with her and Chantelle, and we get a confessional of Liana talking about wanting to work with Xander. But then after the immunity challenge and after Evie wins immunity, we hear Liana saying confessional that she wants to target Xander now. So again, a bit of inconsistency on that end. That's not particularly great. But from a game position, she's still in a good position. She's still closely aligned with Chantelle, and I have no reason to suspect that Liana will be taken out soon, per se. I mean, unless it's as a way of weakening Chantelle, but even then, I feel like Ricard is more likely to be placed in that spot, as while Chantelle and Ricard have been shown to be fighting and having some tension. What I found strange about that is that in this episode, Ricard was mentioned as being Chantelle's closest ally, or he or she is regarded by him as his closest ally. So I could see them trying, if a flip were to happen, for Ricard to be taken over Liana. But there is also the chance that Leon could be sniped out as well as a way of weakening Chantelle. So again, things aren't entirely secure. I think she'll be fine in the short term. But again, I feel like there's just a lot of rockiness in her edit. Like the fact that she played her knowledge is power incorrectly was such a massive knock to her edit. And with Xander really starting to pick up now, I don't think she's gonna win. I could see Xander trying to take out Liana through that regard. Like I can see Liana being weakened, especially once that ship starts to sink. So I could see Liana sort of collapsing that way. So I feel like a lot of her success in the game at this point is dependent on her success with the cookout and specifically with Chantelle staying in the game. But with Chantelle starting to go a bit downhill and that downfall starting to be set up, I wouldn't be surprised if Chantelle went out first and then Liana went out shortly thereafter. But again, I think for the short term she'll be fine. Like I don't think she'll go out before Ricard per se, or possibly even Nasir. But I don't think she's gonna win, and I feel like there was enough inconsistency in her edit to where I wasn't that impressed by her either. So I have her here at number five. Now we're moving on to number four, and we're going to be talking about someone who, again, I've labeled as a decoy winner for a while now. And I feel like this episode really solidified my belief on that. I really feel like this person is being set up for a downfall at some point. But at number four, we have Chantelle. Now, again, this was another big episode for Chantelle, got a lot of screen time, but I'm not convinced that was necessarily positive for her. I mean, she's still in the majority. She's still a part of this cookout alliance, and she still has Liana as her closest ally. And the plan going in is to target the Yase members. Of course, that hasn't particularly changed. But along the way, we start to see Chantel really get a lot of content. We see her after the reward challenge, talking, getting really emotional and talking about how she hasn't gotten any rewards. And I get it. Like some people might see it as sympathetic, but to me, I didn't really see that as that good. I felt like, in light of everything we've seen so far, I feel like that comes off more as emotional and meant to show her in that type of light. But in the lead up to the immunity challenge, we see her really talk about Evie and how Evie is a big threat and she wants to get rid of Evie. Really being on that bandwagon. And then after the immunity challenge, which Evie ends up winning, we see her really go all in on Xander. Like we see her talk about wanting to flush Xander's idol, wanting to get out Xander, really prop him up as a big threat. But then we get to see some negativity where we see Danny like pitch the idea of targeting Nasir with his idol in his pocket, which again, I'm not entirely convinced why Danny wanted to target Nasir so early, but whatever. But along with this, we start to see this rift form between Chantelle and Deshawn, where Deshawn feels like Chantelle isn't listening to him. And, we get some content of that before Tribal, where Chantelle is trying to fix that by trying to fix that by listening to people. She gets a confessional talking about how, as a pastor, she has to listen to people, which is okay. Again, she seems to be on board with the plan of splitting the vote with Tiffany and Nasir to try to get out Tiffany, ideally. But then at Tribal, like we see that go live, and we see Chantel really take the charge here. And through that, we get that another confrontation between Chantel and Deshawn, where Deshawn tells her not to baby him. I felt like that wasn't a good look for Chantel whatsoever. And really, like, at the end of the day, they still get their way. They've got Tiffany. But I feel like this again is setting up another crack in Chantel's game with her forming this rift with Deshawn. And I feel like if there is going to be a flip at some point, that Chantel will be on the butt end of that. And I could see Deshawn like taking this and flipping the game onto Chantel to try to take control for himself, as he feels like Chantel has been too domineering to him. So I could very well see that flip happening. And considering also what I found strange about this episode was how over the last couple episodes we've seen like Chantelle and Ricard have a bit of tension. And we definitely saw that here in this episode too with the whole papaya situation. But what I found strange about that was how Ricard still regards Chantelle as his number one ally, at least for the time being. And yeah, and I feel like Chantelle in turn feels the same way. So it's strange because I feel like this could go one of two ways. One is that Ricard and Chantelle do flip on each other, forcing that battle to happen. And I feel like if that were to happen, Chantelle would end up winning and taking out Ricard. Or the two of them still manage to stick together, but then the Sean flips and he sees Ricard and Chantelle as an item, and he feels like he can take out Ricard first as a way of weakening Chantelle. So no matter what way you look at it, whether the fight that Chantelle and Ricard had a couple episodes ago amount to anything or not, I still feel like either way we're going to be losing Ricard soon, and that in turn is going to reflect poorly onto Chantelle. I feel like regardless, we're going to see Deshawn try to flip on Chantelle at some point, and based on everything we've gone so far, I wouldn't be surprised if Chantelle was being set up for a downfall based on how emotional we've seen her act, like warranted or not, but also these cracks that she's forming with her different relationships. I feel like Ricard is one option that could undermine her. I could see Deshawn being another option that undermines her. But regardless, she seems to be set up as a big player that will eventually have a downfall. So I don't think she's winning at this point. I have her here at number 4. Now we're moving on to number 3, and we have someone who I can't believe this person has gotten this high on the list. But considering that Tiffany's gone at this point, considering the field that we have left, I think number 3 kind of fits. So at number 3, I had to put Xander. Now, again, Xander has had a very weird edit this season where during a lot of the pre merge, he definitely got a lot of inconsistent content. I feel like a lot of his content was circumstantial, like such as when he went to the summit. But also, I feel like there was plenty of negativity involved, where we saw him at the bottom, him thinking that he was all in with the Yase Alliance when really they were going to vote him out at the next opportunity. I didn't think that was particularly great. However, I still feel like Xander is being set up as a big player. That's something I said during the pre merge. I feel like he was someone that was going to be there for the long haul. And I think this episode kind of embodies how I feel about Xander in general, where he definitely got a lot of content. We saw him really try to integrate within this majority alliance to varying results. But we also got some positivity in there. Like after the reward challenge, he explains that part of the reason why he wanted to sit out of the challenge was so that he could hang out with the losers, because he thinks the losers will bring out more raw emotions, which can in turn lead to better bonds. And I thought that was a very interesting perspective. But if I'm being honest, I think the main reason was because he thought there was going to be an advantage at the sit out bench, which he was right, but he just didn't look hard enough. And I actually thought that was a weird moment as well, where that was a negative moment of him sitting out, like going out of his way to sit out to try to look for this advantage. Didn't find it, and then after they head out, we see Jeff see tell everyone that it wasn't pulled out, and he called it a missed opportunity. That wasn't great for Xander, and really, I think his decision to sit out in general, like, was a bit theatrical. I think Tiffany highlighted this in her exit interviews, where she felt like it was all performative and designed to build his resume. And I think he's doing that. He's really someone that's trying to play a big game here. And I think he'll work. I think he'll definitely get towards the end. And I feel like based on what we've been getting, that he will ultimately get back into the majority somehow. It's just a question of if he can win. And that's something I struggled with during a lot of this, where again, like on one hand, he is playing very aggressively and he is someone that understands the game. Like I am impressed by the game that he's playing. But on the other hand, like I feel like again, age is definitely a factor. It's going to be hard for some of these older people to want to hand over $1 million to a 20-year-old, and even harder for people like Evie or Liana or Chantelle to want to vote in a season where there's all this diversity to give the winner to a straight white male. So that's something I had to contend with as well. But just looking at his edit and really based on how he is as a player or what we've seen so far, I think he's going to be in it for the long haul. And again, it's really weird because we've gotten both positive and negative content from him throughout the season. But I feel like now that we're in the merge, now that Tiffany's gone, and I still think a Yase member is going to win, even if we got content of them splitting up. I think Xander could make it to the end. It's just a question of whether he can win. And again, this is sort of a weird position for me to be in at this point, as I've always thought that if he got to the end, he would struggle to win a jury vote. I never had much doubt that he would become a big player. But again, I feel like with other people edgically doing better than him, I felt like those people just had a better shot of winning, which sort of put him down in the rankings, and then his inconsistent edit. But now at this point in the season, I'm starting to feel better about him. And it's weird for me to put him as high as he is, even if my overall opinion of him hasn't changed too much. But considering where we're at in the season, and for all we know, we could be in for another wild ride in these coming weeks, I kind of have to put Xander here at number three. So that's why I have him this high. Now we're moving on to number two, and I have reservations over whether this person even had a good episode ethically, but I feel like based on everything we've seen so far in the season, and also just based on what's happening in the game, I feel like number two is a good spot. So at number two, I have Deshawn. Now, again, I feel like Deshawn has had the best chance of winning out of anyone on Lubu, and I feel like within the game, he's been playing the best game of the season. I mean, he's been in the center of Lou from the beginning with his core alliance of Danny and Sydney. And in the merge, he's in a fantastic position where he's in the cookout, like with all the people of color. He's on the Luvu tribe, which is still has most of the numbers, and he's also in the guys alliance, like along with Xander. Like, and there's also his relationship with Evie, which hasn't really gone anywhere, but it's something at least. Like, I feel like he is playing the best game of the season so far. Like, but on the other hand, like, I feel like his edit is sort of weird. I mean, not so much his edit itself, but more so the fact that Luvu as a whole was so under edited in the pre-merge to where I didn't think any of them would win. But if I had to pick one person from Luvu that could win, it'd probably be Deshawn. So to that end, I always had Deshawn as a relatively high contender. And based on the game that he's playing so far, I mean, I feel like he is doing pretty well gameplay wise. But this episode was kind of weird for him, where, again, a lot of his focus in this episode centered around, again, earlier on in the episode wanting to target Evie along with the Majority Alliance, but then later on after the immunity challenge wanting, like along with Danny to target Nasir, and we through that he gets into a bit of a confrontation with Chantelle, where Chantelle wants to target Xander, but obviously Deshawn doesn't want to get rid of Xander because he's kind of aligned with him. And again, he wants to take out Nasir instead, who also has an idol, but also is someone he thinks is a threat. Now, again, we could question whether or not targeting Nasir here is necessarily the best option, but whatever. And then this culminates in Tribal, where once it goes live, we see Chantelle and Deshawn get into another confrontation where Deshawn literally tells Chantelle that she shouldn't baby him. And I thought that was very interesting to see, as on one hand, I think he is playing the best game of the season, and he is in a lot of control on this majority group. But on the other hand, Chantelle is kind of this major force that's sort of challenging that to some degree. So I think we could be seeing a confrontation happening soon. And I feel like if Deshawn does try to flip on Chantelle, that it will ultimately work, and Deshawn will get out Chantelle at some point. Now, I've always wondered whether he'll actually get to the end, because I think if he gets to the end, he'll probably win. It's just a matter of if he can get all the way to the end, and I have a lot of confidence that he could at this point, based on his positioning in the game and his willingness to play more dynamically. And again, it's not like his edit's been terrible. I mean, I feel like he has been a victim of being on Luvu, which has just been so under edited to where he hasn't gotten enough screen time. But the show still has dedicated time to showing him on the show to where I do consider him a top contender. And especially now with Tiffany gone, I mean, Tiffany going changes a lot in my opinion, and we'll see that with my number one spot. But I think if Tiffany isn't the winner, like that definitely increases Deshawn's win equity in my eyes. So that's a big reason that he's jumped up to number two this week. Now we're moving on to number one, the person I think has the best shot of winning Survivor 41 at this point. And I'm not going to lie, I'm not entirely sure about this pick because I'm not going to lie. I mean, I still think this person could be targeted within the next couple of weeks. And they're in a pretty bad position gameplay wise at this point. But I think this episode had enough going for them in their edit to where I could see them surviving. But at number one, and I can't believe I'm saying this, the person I think is the most likely to win Survivor 41 right now is Evie. Now, again, Evie was in a pretty bad position this week where they would have been targeted had they not won the immunity challenge. We see that where they get a visibility spike early in the episode, and that made me think that either they would be voted out in this episode or they would win immunity. Now, obviously, we saw the latter happen where they won immunity. However, we got clarification since then that they would have been voted out had they not won immunity, as the majority talked so much about how big of a threat they are, and like especially Chantelle, but definitely some of the others as well. Like they know that Evie is a big threat at this point, and that's not particularly great. I think that could carry over into the next episode for all I know. But on the other hand, I feel like if Evie is able to survive until the point where I think a flip is going to happen, because again, I've alluded to this before, I think a flip is going to happen at this point. I don't see how this majority, which has so many cracks, is going to stick together all the way until the end. Like if Evie can survive until that point, and if they, along with Xander, are able to flip the game, then I think Evie could be in an all right position. Now, the main reason I have them as high as I have is because of their edit. Now, again, this was a more prominent episode for them, and we saw some interesting confessionals from Evie, particularly how they alluded back to the turtle scene a couple episodes ago, and how they wonder what happened to the Yase tribe, the underdogs, and they talked about how Yase's done now, and I wasn't sure what to make of that at the time. Like, I feel like that might have been a bad sign, but I don't know. Like, I mean, considering Yase is technically the underdog yet again, I think now that Tiffany is gone, that could cause them to come back together. I mean, they technically weren't apart, technically, as they didn't, I mean, vote against each other per se. But again, I feel like they will come back together at some point. And if Evie can at least survive, then they can cause a flip and really run the game. And I think there's enough in Evie's edit to justify a winner's edit in my eyes. Like I could see Evie being a logical winner at this point. But and that's a big reason why I have them here at number one. But I will say that this is a very tenuous placement here on number one, as they could be voted out next week. They could be voted out the episode after that. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it's impossible for Evie to not be targeted from this point forward, especially when they've been a target the last two rounds now. However, I think there's enough there in the edit to where I could see them surviving. And if not Evie, then probably Xander will be in the number one spot, probably. I think this next week will be very important for seeing how Evie's trajectory plays out, whether them and Xander are able to stick together and cause a flip, or if the majority will be able to stick together one more round and take out one of them. And I think if they do stick together, Evie will probably be the person taken out as a result. However, like I said, there's enough in the edit to justify an Evie win, and I think there are enough. I think this episode gave us enough cracks into the majority to where a flip could realistically happen next episode. So, because of that, again, I feel like Evie is probably the most likely to win at this moment. However, I'll admit this list is still in a lot of flux now that Tiffany's gone. So we'll see what happens next week. But for now, I think Evie is the most likely person to win Survivor 41. And there we go. That will do it for this week's installment of my Survivor 41 Power Rankings. Obviously, this season just got a lot more interesting now that Tiffany's gone, and I'm very excited for what will come in the following episodes. I know there's going to be a lot of dynamic gameplay left to happen, and again, if things keep going up, then I could see this being a good season by the end of this. I really like this cast, and based on the edit we've gotten so far, I'm very curious to see how the rest of the season will play out. So, again, I'll be back next week talking about Survivor 41 again. Like in the meantime, I have other videos about other topics I enjoy talking about. Feel free to like, subscribe, and let people know. Like I really enjoy making this content. But for now, that's the video. See ya.